everyone, and welcome to the first interview in a series of interviews titled How I Got into PT School. I know when I was trying to get into PT school, I wanted to take in as much information as I could to try to best understand what people that did get in, how they got there. So this interview series is designed around trying to help you understand what it was like for many people to get in. With that being said, we're going to start. I'm lucky enough to have Dan here. Dan, thanks for taking time out of your day to join me for this interview.
Hey, of course, man. It's my pleasure, dude.
All right, Dan. So let's start off. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from?
Yeah, a little bit about myself. So I'm from the Bay Area, San Jose, California. Born and raised, grew up here my entire life. Went to undergrad at UC Davis. And yeah, I mean, took a little untraditional route. So I actually graduated political science. So a little bit different from everybody else who I'm sure who's applying to PT school, but we can get in a little more detail about that later on. On that, in terms of myself, I again, like not a traditional PT background. I didn't play any sports in high school. I was a fat kid, if anything. Didn't want to really work out. I had slow mile time, everything like that. But the second career change for me. So originally was going for law school, and things happened, and found PT, and here I am.
Yeah, so you started jumping a lot of the questions. That was great. So you went to school. It sounds like in San Jose. You went to high school there. You didn't play any sports. Did you consider PT? Like when did PT come into the picture? Because it sounds like you started with law, but then switched over to physical therapy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, like I'll be honest, I didn't know anything about PT. It wasn't until I was working as a law paralegal work and actually fractured my ankle while running. And when I got into PT, I'm like, oh wow, here's a world where it's an amazing world where you can help people, but at the same time still be physically active. So I kind of like realized I still want to help people, but not sitting behind a desk, 70 hours a week. So kind of looked into, after I talked to the PT who I worked with, like what his background was and how he got there, and started looking around myself, and then I found, I had something I want to do, so I went back to school, and here I am.
It's kind of funny you say that. A lot of people, their first introduction to physical therapy is they get hurt, and then they go to a physical therapist, and they're like, "Wow, this guy's really happy, or this girl's really happy. I want to do what they're doing." So it sounds like you kind of had a taste of that.
Yeah, yeah, talking to a lot of my classmates, very similar story, right? Like they were, they played sports their entire life, got injured, got to PT, and saw people fall in love. And that's same to me. Also, another thing, my dad actually had a stroke a number of years ago. We had a PT come to our house, and it was just interesting seeing, him working with my dad, be able to walk again, be able to, use his hands again. So definitely, it's I think for most people, unfortunately, you don't know PT until you've had to go through PT.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because on one hand, you're getting this really nice exposure to, in your case, a career, um, but usually that comes at the cost of an injury. Um, I heard you say that you hurt your ankle while you were running. So clearly you didn't do sports in high school, but it sounds like you started some sports after.
Yeah, so long story short, I mean, like, I again not active at all, super unhealthy, super heavy, whatnot. It took actually a bad relationship to end my, to a breakup to kind of make me like, okay, I need to do something and channel the energy. So, not again, I definitely need a sports background, so I just figured, well, what's the easiest thing to do? Just go out for a run. And it's funny, I was starting off like I didn't know nothing about running, and obviously, I didn't have any program training, so I just ran, and obviously when you haven't really run before, you don't have any experience, your form obviously is atrocious. So I'm sure I didn't have the best form. Actually, I was running in San Francisco. I was working there, and my actually foot caught on the Muni track, and I fractured my ankle that way. So
Wow.
a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a learning experience for sure. It's one of those things where I always hated running, and then it's not until you can't run anymore that you realize actually I really like running. Like, once you can't do something, I think you learn to
Yeah.
love that you actually want it.
Yeah. It's when it's taken away. It's like I got to get back to that.
Yeah, yeah.
So going down to some more of the hardcore questions here that I'm sure a lot of people would come to this video to watch. Um, and that's basically around what it was like applying to grad school. So can you kind of let's rewind the clock a little bit. It sounds like you're deciding that paralegal isn't what you want to do. Uh, Tell us like where you're at when that decision to transfer from one career to another results in you getting into PT school.
Yeah, so it's a journey, that's for sure. Obviously, I did paralegal work for about 3, 4 years right out of undergrad. So I was like 26 around the time when I decided I was going to switch careers. And, I think for a lot of, I don't know, with the viewers here, how old you guys are, but like for me, it was very challenging. It's going back to school and trying to make this transition. So, obviously I looked into what I needed. And again, from a political science background, I didn't have science classes.
Yeah, so like the
I mean, I
chemistry, the
had
physics, and yeah,
exactly. I mean, I had a couple before because, again, in undergrad, I switched careers from, from physics to, engineering to political science and whatnot. So I switched around. So, I mean, I did take a couple classes, but obviously it's been so long that none of them really counted anymore. So I have to go back. So just going back to community college, trying to take your basics, physics, chem, bio, anatomy, physio, and all that stuff. So the challenging part of that was that it's a change, right? I mean, like from being 4 years removed from undergrad, going back into school, being 26 in a classroom full of 17, 18-year-old was
yeah,
definitely a challenge. But at the same time, it gave me a certain amount of respect because coming back to school, like I knew I wanted to be here, versus before a lot of people didn't want to be.
right.
Before I didn't really want to be there. I just did because I had to, right?
Yeah, it sounds
So
like it
now
took a
you're able
lot
to
of the
kind of
doubt out of the equation for you.
totally, totally. So it was good to go back there as a second time around in school because you're a lot more focused. I think one of the hardest challenge was just always financial. Once you're in a career for a number of years, you're kind of used to a certain amount of salary and lifestyle and income. So when I go back to school full time, I didn't have the opportunity to have a certain income that I was used to. Right? So what I ended up doing was move back to my folks for a little bit. So went to school full time, and I decided that after I needed a job, so I worked as I worked at the mall as an associate at a clothing store. Got promoted to manager real quickly, which was really nice because there's a little pay bump there. But it was challenging trying to balance, a full time caseload of school and then working full time as well too. So I don't recommend it. I guess for me personally, just because I was like 26, 27, like oh my god, I'm getting older and older, kind of stressed about it. So I figured I'd rather just load it up heavy. So I remember I had a day where I was taking physics, bio, and chem all at the same time.
Wow, that is a heavy day.
You can imagine. So I remember it was my Tuesday, it was my long day. So I literally had 7 a.m. got to campus, and it'd be like bio lab, and then bio lecture, and then chem lab, chem lecture, physics lab, physics lecture. I was like literally from campus from 7 in the morning until 10 p.m. at night, and it was the worst idea I could do to myself. And then on top of that, on the days when it was lighter on the weekends, I would go to work and study or go to work as well too, and trying to manage that. So took a lot out of me. I'm not gonna lie, I don't recommend that.
Yeah.
But again, I want to get there as soon as possible, but
Well,
it all worked out.
it sounds like it was a very humbling experience. Coming back from a career and then going back to school, living with your parents, taking a pay cut. Sounds like it was very challenging, but you certainly you made it through. Clearly, because you're now at the other end of that tunnel. Um, so when you were taking your classes, I mean, obviously you had to go back and retake all the hard sciences. Do you remember what your GPA was like coming out of school when you're starting your application process now and you're wondering, right, if you're competitive or not, which is the question I asked myself a lot. So
Yeah, honestly, I think that's the hardest part for me because, my undergrad, obviously, when I was in undergrad, I wasn't planning to go, into this profession. And for my political science major, my GPA was 3.6 ish, I believe. So it was relatively decent for law school, or law school. I was hoping to get a good LSAT and balance it out. Obviously, then coming back and then doing my prereqs for PT school, again taking three biophysics and chem at the same time while working. I'll be honest, I didn't do as well as I want to. I know a lot of people take a little bit slower, take one class at a time, get the A, get the A, get the A. I'm like, well, no, I need to get done as soon as possible. So I took all three, and I'll be honest, I think when I finished all my prereq GPA was not the best. It was like a 3.15, I think. So like it barely above the minimum 3.0. So
right,
I was a little bit nervous about that just because I feel like, oh no, like I know a lot of people are very competitive, and 3.7s, 3.8. I'm like, oh crap! Like,
Yeah.
what am I gonna do?
Well, you look on the forums, when you're applying to grad school, the first thing I did was to go online and you search the student doctor network, or you search Reddit, and the
Yeah,
first thing you see is, well, other students. I applied with 3.9, I aced the GRE, and it's so you're wondering in this instance, putting yourself in that mindset, it must have been really difficult to push through and keep going with the application process.
yeah. Obviously, it was super nerve wracking, to be honest. And then I guess the thing for me though is, obviously, most schools require hours, working at a clinic, something like that. So after getting my GPA, I worked at a clinic for a while, and it kind of reminded me why I was doing what I was doing. And again, coming from a second career, I kind of jumping straight into the deep end. Like I had no alternative. There was no like, well, if it doesn't work out, I'm gonna try this. I'm gonna try like, no, no.
Right.
I think by eliminating opportunities to have an escape route made me like, well, I'm all in, so I gotta do my best, right?
That sounds like a good piece of parting wisdom for those who are considering doing this is just go full tilt and don't look back, right?
Yeah, obviously, like, don't get me wrong. I feel like, if I were to have not gone in, I'm sure I would have figured something out, But I think when
Right.
you go into it, if you're already planning an escape route, it makes you, I wouldn't say you're half-assing it, but I feel like you're not gonna push as hard. Like, I guess for me, it's like, this is it. There's no other option. So you really go pretty hard into it. And I think like that kind of mindset allows you, because there are moments, I mean, God, working 35 hours a week, school full time, there are moments I'm like, well, dude, why am I doing this to myself? Why am I torturing myself like
Yeah.
this? And I think it's when when you know what your end goal is, why you're doing what you're doing, just remembering your motivation and your end goal, like it helps those you will have dark days,
Yeah.
and just keeping that in mind is going to help you get through those hard
Right.
times.
Sounds like the consistency is what got you through.
Yeah.
So going back to those dark days, so now you have your 3.1 GPA. Do you recall what
Yeah.
your GRE score was going into the application season?
Yeah, so for GREs, I mean, again, depending on the viewers, listeners, it's going to change. They keep changing the scores and everything. But when I applied, I think 340 was a max score, and I got 323 on mine. So, lucky for me, my GRE was relatively,
And that's the
was
combination because there's two, right? There's the math portion and the English, and
yeah,
so the combination of
yeah,
two is,
yeah. I think it's like 170 on each section.
yeah,
Yeah. So, and I've been blessed enough that for whatever reason why, statewide tests like these, like, the SATs, GREs, I've always scored really well on.
hmm
So I think most schools is like you need a minimum 300. I think 312 is competitive. So with the 323, I knew that I was definitely that brought me up, and I was hoping that would balance out obviously my lower SAT scores. But on that note, I feel like for me, the biggest thing is more the letter recommendations.
yeah.
I know how yours went, but like, when I worked at the clinic, I got to know the PTs there very, very, very well, and I showcase myself as who I am as a person, as a human being, and I think that was reflected in my letter recommendations, which the school I got into eventually. I think when I spoke to a couple of people, that they felt that that was a stronger point. So
Yeah. So speaking of schools that you got into, let's go over how many schools did you apply to versus how many you got in.
yeah, so I again, being a little older, I didn't have the luxury of, well, I'll apply second round, third round, fourth round. So I'm like, well, this is my one round, and I got to get in somewhere. So I applied to as many schools as possible. So I actually applied to all the CSUs in
Oh
California
wow.
that had a PT program. Obviously, Samuel Merritt, UCSF, all in California. And then I applied to a couple of schools on the East Coast, George Washington University. I know Washington University up north. My goal was to kind of spread a wide net and hope for the best. Which obviously, it's a lot more costly. I mean, I
Right, because
can't
you're
remember how
paying
much
per application, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like with that in mind, obviously it was super costly, but I figured I'd rather,
Right, if you're all
get
in.
all in.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all in, so you might as well. So with that in mind, I applied to everywhere, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it was a little disheartening when email after email of, we're sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry, we're sorry. I was ended up waitlisted, I think, from Washington University, and then also Samuel Merritt in Oakland, California. And then it then became the waiting game, right? And you're on the wait list,
Which
fun
is
story.
a very terrible place to be, right? Mentally,
Oh,
on the wait
oh
list.
my God.
You're checking it,
Oh God,
every
yeah, there
day.
was. I remember Central American University sent me an email, as I was on the wait list, and I remember distinctively, I was person number 14 out of 140. But the caveat was when they sent me the email, they put me as person number 14.0 out of 140, and I was thinking to myself, like, why is there a point zero? Like, you can't have a half a person,
Oh, I
right?
see.
Oh, dude, and the fear came over. I'm like, wait a second, am I 14.0 or am I actually 140? And whoever typed it up threw in a decimal for no reason, messed it up. So I remember
Oh,
like emailing the person like, hey, I appreciate the email. Can you clarify? Am I 14 or 140? Because that's a
yeah, that's a
slight
very big
difference
difference.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember just getting that email. Oh no, you're 14, so you're in good. Like, oh my god, thank God. So yeah,
So
that's how I went
being
about it.
14 on the wait list, that ultimately resulted in you getting in, which is great. For the process of you getting into school, I know you mentioned a little bit earlier that it's really important to find a good clinic to get good letters of recommendation. Where did you do your inpatient and outpatient hours, trying to apply to PT school?
Yeah, so all the schools I applied to, and a couple I didn't have any inpatient hours. So a lot of ones I applied to, they were more optional for inpatient. But for my outpatient, I applied to a PT clinic out in San Jose, Los Gatos actually. And the way it worked was obviously it was hard to get 8 hours. I actually went on Yelp and looked up PT clinics in the area, and basically just emailed every single clinic, hey, I'm this is my background. I'm interested as an aide position. Do you have an opening? A lot of times they don't have postings like, oh yeah, we're looking for an aide or that. So I think just putting your name out there and obviously reading all the reviews, so I knew I would find the good clinics where patients liked being there. Because the last thing you want to do is go to a clinic where patients hate it there.
Right.
So I applied to a bunch of clinics, sent my resume out, and one or a couple got back to me, and the other ones I interviewed for, the one that I ended up choosing was I felt like from all the patient reviews, on Yelp, that they really liked the place, that the PTs there did a great job. So
It sounds like you had, if you were working there, it sounds like you had like a lot of hours then.
yeah, so funny thing, I guess when I came into that clinic, there was just a switch in terms of like, with AIDS, they come in waves, and I guess they just had a wave of like people, quitting, moving on different positions, starting school and whatnot. So they basically were short staffed. So when I came in there, I was, there's a little ramping up period from, never have been in the PT clinic as an aide to being an aide. So like I had to, exposure to everything,
Right.
and after a couple of weeks of getting my feet wet, I basically was
Off
full
and
on
running.
fledged. Like, yeah, and it was one of those clinics that was a busy clinic, so I was working with three patients at the same time. So it was a good experience.
Yeah.
Learning how to multitask.
Yeah, it sounds like you really have this go-getter mentality, right? Going from your career as a paralegal, switching over, taking all the classes that you can possibly take, which sounds like
Yeah,
you might or might not recommend to do, but you did it, and then applying
yeah,
to all these different clinics and just making it happen. I really like what you brought up earlier about the not giving yourself an escape route, right? Like becoming or being all in on the process.
yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing to embody. So I'm really glad that that was part of your journey because that's how I was. Was there's this is it end all be all. Um, so in hindsight, speaking of all that and kind of encapsulating everything you said in your process of getting into grad school, is there anything you would have done differently?
You know, that question, people always ask this question, right?
Yeah.
And whether just PT or just life in general. And I feel like it's hard to really give an answer to that because the reality is that no, you can't really change the past, and even if you could, right? Like you don't know how it would change the future. And I feel like every misstep that I took led me to the right path I'm supposed to be.
Right.
And I think sometimes those lessons are valuable lessons.
So
So I
taking
feel like
yeah, taking a lesson from the hard turns. It sounds like.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it got me to where I'm at, so I can't complain, eh?
Right, yeah. So, I mean, even though arguably your path was longer, right, because you did the paralegal work first, you can't
Yeah,
really complain about it because ultimately resulted in you getting the career that you wanted. So,
Yeah,
I guess you wouldn't
exactly.
change anything about that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, for those watching the video, I'm sure someone's noticed it, but you have a skeleton in the background. For those who don't know, me and Dan were actually classmates, so you had a name for the skeleton pre-graduation. You want to share what the name was?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why my skeleton it looked like a Freddy to me, so I just called him Freddy throughout entire PT school. And then obviously with graduation, I had a cap and gown on him a couple weeks ago. I just called him Frederick because once you've graduated, it's Dr. Frederick now instead of just Freddy. So
Yeah, Dr.
yeah,
Frederick. I love it.
yeah,
So now that you're done, why don't you tell us what you're doing since graduating from PT school?
yeah. For a lot of people, walking into PT school, I think you have one kind of mindset of like what you want to do. And it's amazing how 3 years of PT school can completely alter your course of direction.
Yeah.
Um, again, grew up in Bay Area is, my entire life, California boy. I had this mindset that I was going to be here my entire life. But I'm actually now about to start a residency in East Tennessee, working for the VA, working towards my orthopedic certified specialist.
Very nice. Yeah, so that's a very
Yeah,
good program that you got into. Very
yeah.
excited for you to go on that journey. You also,
Thanks,
from
man.
what I understand, you're going to be a teacher part time is part of the curriculum.
Yeah, yeah. So what's really great about being a residency, at least the one that I'm at, other ones don't have the same thing, but their goal is to not only integrate you in the clinical side, but also in the academic side. So very much similar. So it's like a three semester kind of program. So like the first semester, when the students are just being introduced to your foundational class, how to patient handling. So I'll be in that class as well too, kind of like a TA, roaming around the room. If you have a question, I can help answer them, maybe show them techniques that I've learned. Second semester, once I get more comfortable, then I'll teach a guest lecture. And by the final semester, as I get more into it, I'll be able to actually not only teach a lecture, a group of lectures, but then also administer a test as well too. So, shout out to the East Tennessee VA orthopedic residency program. Their goal is really to help the clinician not just be more of a well-rounded clinician. So I get to teach well in class as well too, and hopefully long term, I'll be able to be a faculty somewhere part time to be able to to
Stay on
hone your
top.
clinical skill. Yeah, but stay on top of the most recent research and see what's going academically. Because I think it's important to have that continued balance in your life.
Right, the continuing education is something that they really hammered in our program was just staying on top of what's going on. And it sounds like you're going to have exposure to that if you're working with new, fresh faces all the time. And
Yeah,
speaking of that, where do you see the field of PT going in this next 10 years? Where do you see the changes being?
it's a funny question you asked. If you asked a question a year ago,
Right,
completely
yeah,
different answer. You
circumstances are
know,
very different right now.
yeah, and in light of COVID, I mean, we just completely turned the entire world upside down. To be honest with you, I don't know if we'll ever be the same as we once were before. I was at the VA. My last internship was at the VA, and working with veterans. We obviously we still want to help our veterans, so we actually did a lot more telehealth.
Hmm.
And I was one of the fortunate people who actually got to take my clinical to the very end. So we were able to develop a lot of stuff that obviously they didn't have contingency plans for telehealth or for COVID, obviously. So
Right.
I was on the ground force with a lot of my classmates, a couple of my classmates, to be able to develop a program of how do we, bring telehealth to our veterans, and how do we, how what kind of format should it be like? How do we go about it? So it's interesting to see, obviously creating that and be able to implement that. So, definitely, I think telehealth is going to be big going forward.
Right, and
Um,
just for our
yeah.
listeners, just to make sure, so VA, the veterans, so you're working with vets, and that is an outpatient clinic, right? So outpatient being
Yes.
that you're not staying the night
Yeah.
at that location. And then telehealth, you want to break down what telehealth is, just for those who don't know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, telehealth is basically just anything you can do in person, but you're doing over either the phone, you're doing over video, um, email. You might be Jamie. I forget if email counts or not, but I think it's more like telephone and video is really where it's
Yeah,
at.
I think so. It's more about what we're doing right now, as though you're doing. If you were a patient and I was the PT, we would be conducting our session in a format similar to this. Um, So it sounds exactly like what it is, right? Just telehealth. In some cases, like you were saying, phone calls, kind of checking up.
Yeah,
How's the incision site? Does it look inflamed? Things like that for
yeah.
people in more rural communities. But I agree. Yeah, it's interesting. This question a year ago would have been completely different, but now it's in light of everything that's going on. I'm actually
Yeah.
excited because perhaps there's going to be some very steep changes in the field. I know I referenced a group to you to do an interview about virtual reality and its role in telehealth, which I think would be a pretty exciting direction for telehealth to
Oh,
take.
definitely.
Um, but yeah, so is there any, as we wrap this up here, is there any imparting wisdom that Dan could give to our viewers that you'd want them to know before they apply or getting anything about
Um,
PT?
life's a journey. Life's honestly a journey. I think my experience applying to PT school is just keeping in mind the end result, but also appreciating the journey you're going through. And I think that was probably my biggest lesson during PT school because I thought I struggled taking three science classes and working full time. Got into PT school, and my God, completely different monster. And everyone will tell you this and like, oh yeah, prepare, but you can't ever really prepare for it, truly prepare for it until you're actually in PT school and struggling. And, my hearts go out to the new PT, students as as we try to adjust with all the COVID and being able to do like like online classes because I'll be honest, I hated online classes.
Yeah,
My focus wasn't there. It was very hard to focus. And also, again, I'm a people person, so being able to be in a classroom with somebody and just having friends around, talk to people and just shooting the breeze all the time. It was a good feeling, and it helped keep me sane. So I'm sure it's gonna be a struggle nowadays, with online classes, and I don't know how that's going to change going forward. With again with COVID and how hopefully it gets better or whatnot. But I think the biggest thing is just for people just to, especially in your PT school, embrace the journey, take it one day at a time. And honestly, there'll be moments where the goal is just stay afloat,
yeah, yeah.
just
Just survive.
just 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 survive. You'll get to the other end of it. You know, I I remember my third year buddy telling me that. I'm like, this is a bunch of BS. But now that I'm on the other side, you can definitely relate and understand. Like, yeah, just survive.
Yeah,
Just keep breathing, keep trucking on. You'll get to the very end. You'll get to the end of it.
yeah. I remember a saying when I was going through the application process. The PTs that I talked to, friends who were in the same field, they were saying the hardest part is just getting in. Once you're in, you're set. But boy, that was such a misrepresentation of grad school. so
Yeah, yeah,
so it is hard
definitely.
getting in though. So don't discredit yourself. Pat yourself on the back. It's hard to make it through that barrier of actually getting accepted into a grad program. So certainly it's
Yeah,
difficult, but it is also difficult on the other side. So like you said, it's one of those things you just got to keep on trucking.
yeah.
Some days you just survive, and that's good enough. So
Oh yeah.
all right, Dan. Well, thank you so much for being
Hey
the
man,
first person in this series of interviews. I really
hey
appreciate
man, my
you
pleasure.
taking the time to come in and have a chit chat with me.
Yeah, dude, my pleasure, man.
All right, man. I will talk to you later. Okay. Have a good one.
All right, dude. We'll see you, man.